Okay, we're on. For this session, I wanted to sort of really share some quick tips for CTF competitions, and more specifically, how do you go about using CTF competitions to learn and get the most out of it? And because I think a big issues with these CTF competitions that gets a lot of people discouraged or focus on the wrong things is they care too much about the competition and winning and trying to get points. And if that's your focus, then potentially you can sort of lose sight of the real value you can get from it, and you can potentially get burnt out and get very discouraged when you run into these CTF competitions where you don't get anywhere and you don't get any points and you just feel rotten about yourself. And so that's why I wanted to have this session today. And videos I really recommend about on this topic are the videos by liveoverflow. He has a few that are really good in terms of how do you go about learning and playing CTFs. Highly recommend. And there was a recent one by John Hammond who gave really good advice too about approaching it and how do you think about CTF competitions to maximize your skill development and your learning process. And if you watch John Hammond's video initially, you might think that's so obvious because he'll do something like make sure you're competing at a competition or a challenge appropriate to your skill level. And to some, to people they might think, oh, that's so obvious, duh, right? Obviously, I want to play in a competition that's fit for me. But a lot of people, what I've seen in the community is a lot of people don't do that. They don't approach it that way, and then they get a negative experience with CTF competitions, unfortunately. And that's a bummer. So even though for some of us who sort of know this aspect of it, it is necessary for someone like John Hammond to explain it, because a lot of beginners or people who are just getting into it, they don't realize it, and then they have bad experience with CTF competitions. So to quickly share what I went through recently, right? So I was playing this small local CTF competitions, and there were only a few of the challenges that I was not able to solve, and I thought I should be able to solve it. So this is sort of give you an example of it, right? You have this website here, and it asks you to enter a string, so I could put in a string. So say I put in the string foo, right? I submit, and then it gives you an output, right? It says encoded and then some value. And for folks, when they see this, they might automatically think, oh, it's doing some kind of base 64 thing, right? And then therefore you're like, okay, it's doing some kind of base 64 thing. How do I go about solving it? So for these kind of challenges, perhaps there's a flag file somewhere and you have to find it. And then another possible thing is you have to find some kind of vulnerability that gives you more privilege. And then with that privilege, then you can use that privilege to try to find the flag. So those are usually the two kind of routes for these kind of challenges. So a typical approach someone usually do with these kind of competition is they want to get the answers right away, and they want to get their points right away, which initially that's okay, that's normal. And that's what I did initially. I did some easy stuff that I thought, okay, these are obvious stuff. I'll go with this directory. I'm going to try these obvious things, and not to give spoiler alert, so I'm not going to solve this. I'm not going to give the answer to this, but I did some stuff. I was able to get some error messages that showed me, okay, if I do this one thing, I get an error message. So the logic, so I got to a different place in the web logic, but still it didn't get me closer to giving me clues of what I needed to do next. So I got really frustrated. So I spent about 2 hours just mucking around with it, didn't get anywhere. I tried all the easy stuff that I knew, right? Didn't get anywhere, got frustrated. And that's when I emailed you, right? I emailed Dave, I emailed you and a bunch of my other friends. I was like, man, I think it's this. I think the vulnerability is, I can't get it though. So does anyone have any ideas? Please, go try it out. And I just put it aside. I played it for about 2 hours, got frustrated, very, very upset. I was like, okay, put it aside. I went away for about 12, 13 hours. I emailed you guys, right? Because I don't know, maybe you guys will have an idea. I went away. But then after being away from it from about 10 to 12 hours, I did a bunch of other stuff, had Netflix, exercise, just hung out, had fun. And then after that long break, I came back and I was like, wait a minute, what if I try this? And I tried that. So from my long break, then I had some new ideas and sort of other ideas came about, and so different approaches. So different approaches came about. So okay, I think I'm going to try these new approaches instead. And so I tried these other approaches, and lo and behold, from those approaches, I got a step further. I didn't solve it, but then now I had new clues. I got new information from the challenge. I was like, okay, it's giving more information, and then from that new information, that sparked new ideas on how I can potentially get to another state. And that's why you saw my email. So after I sent the first email, then I really quickly sent you guys another email. Hey, don't give me the answers. Don't tell me. No one give me any spoiler alerts. If you guys solve it, I think I'm onto something. Don't tell me anything, because because then I got to a place where I felt like, oh, now I have some clues that I can work with to potentially get to another step. But so that's a hindsight thing. But let's go back to what originally happened. So what originally happened was I tried some stuff, I got nowhere, and nothing worked for me. So I got frustrated. I was stuck, right? So I was stuck. So for me, it would have been useless to kept on hammering at it because I wasn't getting anywhere. So for these kind of challenges, you have to think about what's happened here. So number one is you're probably running, number one situation is you're running into a challenge you already know how to solve. You already have the skills. You've seen it before. It's a little spin off something you already know. So you're going to like, oh, I know that. And then blah, blah, blah. You solve and get the flag. So that's number one is potentially you already experienced it. You already know, then you will solve it right away. Another possibility is that according to the necessary skill sets and process you have to use, you don't have it within your repertoire at all. So the skill level to solve these challenges is just beyond your current skill set. So for that challenge, for you learning, it's a completely waste of time because you're not going to get anything out of it because you don't have the current background to solve it, right? So that could be potentially the case. So in that case, set that aside and work on other challenges that either on your skill level or one step removed from your skill level. And this is exactly what this challenge is. This challenge is in this third category where I had enough of a foundation. So my foundation wasn't sufficient to solve it right away, but I had enough of a foundation that I was able to get the clues to get to the next stage, right? I was able to get to the next step of the challenge. So this challenge, it had about 5 steps to actually finally solve it. And the first one to get to stage 1, I didn't find out what it was. I was confused. I went away, got a fresh break, then new ideas came up, and then I had to learn new things. So this is why these kind of challenges at this level was perfect for me, where I had to learn new things that is within my current background to learn those new things. So that's why I had to learn new things, and then that got me a little step further. And then once I got a little step further, then I had to learn some more new things, but it was still within my current skill sets. So I iterated through that process, and I eventually got to the final solution. But this challenge could have gone the other way, where I could have got to say this takes 5 stages, 5 different steps to get to the final flag, and I could only get to stage 4. But even if I could only get to the stage 4 and couldn't finally solve it, I should pat myself on the back, because the fact that I got past that first stage that I was stuck on, and then I learn new stuff I'd never done before to get to stage 1. And then again, I got to learn a whole bunch of new stuff to get to stage 3 and stage 4. Those should be all rewarded, even though I got 0 points. If this was an official competition, I would have got 0 points. But that shouldn't discourage you. You should have a different mechanism of how you reward yourself to go about learning and approaching these kind of problems, right? And this is really good because earlier you sort of shared your process of how you went about figuring out and learning Hashcat, where when you ran into your first problem, you didn't give up, right? You had, okay, I ran into a problem, but I have these sources that I'm going to lean on, and I'm going to go to that process. And for Hashcat, I didn't go to it because it wasn't on my priority list. It felt too painful. So I was like, I'm set aside, I'm going to work on this. And then luckily you did it. So now I learned from you, Dave, right? Like David went through that painful process of learning, getting it to work in a VM, and then learning all the arguments, right? It's like, great. And that's why we have these learning sessions where we share this information, right? But basically, in a nutshell, I went through your same process to solve this challenge, right? Where I ran into problems and it's like, okay, what am I trying to do here? And the key difference between what I shared earlier about the wrong approach and this approach is like, my ultimate goal isn't the points and the final solution. My goal is, what did I learn during each of the different phases that helped me progress and then eventually get to the solution? So say if this was an easy challenge where it was like a SQL injection that I knew exactly what it was, okay, this is syntax, and I got the flag. if that was the case, I'd already done it 100 times, it would have been a waste of my time for this challenge because I had learned nothing new. I was just repeating something I already did. So at best, I'm just sharpening my skill set. I'm getting a little faster at it, right? But I'm not learning anything new. But for this challenge, I learned something new, and I use a process of a step by step. And then also, when I get to the next phase, I sort of like, what did I learn new here? Oh, I learned this kind of syntax means this kind of thing with this kind of software, right? Those are the new lessons that you learn. So, you know, yeah, I just wanted to quickly share that. So, you know, people can sort of have a better idea and sort of this possibly this different approach to get more out of it, and to sort of get actual value from it. And sort of, you know, full disclosure, 10 years ago, I sort of played much more CTF and I spent a lot more time playing real CTF competitions. Now, because of my different time commitments, every year I play maybe 1 or 2 CTFs. Really, I don't really play them. But what do I do though? I usually research them a lot though. So what usually happens is a lot of these CTFs, they'll have their game time, their competition time where they play, and then usually there's a buffer period where they'll make the competition available after the game, but then people will give the solutions and the write-ups, right? So for me, I find more, because of my time limitations, I find it more value to like play with it after it's over, and then when I get stuck, I'll have a solution to read through, and then I'll use the solution to read through to like, okay, I didn't know about that, and then to learn new things. And then the other way I do it sometimes is I don't even have enough time to even play it or get it working, so I'll just read the solutions to see, oh, this guy used this new technique I never heard of before, like, whoa, there's this new approach that I never knew about. And then so I would just learn from the write-ups, even if I don't get a chance to sort of actually play with the binary itself. So that's how I'm currently approaching CTFs and sort of that really rich field of so much content to improve my technical skills. Even though, you know, for a year, I rarely play them. I play like 1 or 2 live competitions in a year. So, you know, with that, you know, that's what I wanted to share. Do you have questions, comments, Dave?
Yeah, so, you know, excellent points, Candy. You know, I think that I hope this resonates with especially people who are new, you know, kind of people who might be maybe not in my situation, but similar situation where it's like you started, you're learning about it, that frustration of not being able to solve it, I think is probably the largest issue that everybody has. But one of the things that I think, oh yeah, cool, CTF time.
Right. Yeah.
But do you find yourself, do you find it's better to do the CTF or to do, you know, because they'll put examples of the VMs on like VulnHub and other things like that.
Yeah.
Do you find that for the job, for what you're doing professionally, do you find that going through these processes, does this make you a more efficient employee, or would this make you a more well-learned student to go through the process of doing the CTF?
That is a very challenging question, and there's so many aspects of it to pull. So I think in sort of a general answer to that is it's definitely going to be beneficial for you and it's going to be good for you, but I have a lot of caveats there. There's a lot of caveats there, right? So number one is that unfortunately I feel like one of the mistakes, and this was I think an earlier problem with a lot of these red teaming blue competitions, including I think earlier iterations of CCDC and Cyberforce competitions, where they think, oh, we'll just have these competitions where red and blue teams come together and there's going to be good things. And it's like, yes and no, yes and no. And that's what we've seen where the Cyberforce competition, I've seen this with the CCDC stuff that you're sharing too, where because of all the problems earlier with earlier versions of the competition, where just do these competition is good. You have to set up conditions, infrastructures, different kind of rulings to get even more out of it. Because unfortunately, sometimes these kind of competitions devolve into, I just want to get points, I only want to win, and I just want to do stuff that I want to win, and then when that doesn't work, then it's like, oh, then I'm not really doing anything, right? So the example there with these CTF competitions is like, okay, there's this binary challenge or the virtue challenge. I've never used Ghidra before. I have no idea what to do, crickets, and I just get frustrated. It's like, you know, then I'm like, screw CTF competition. I hate them. I don't know how to do them. because there's not a good progression there. And then so one way I want to answer that is there are some resources that I highly recommend for a beginner to start using. One of them is, what is that? It's given by, it's a beginner CTF competition. I believe it's by the CMU folks or the NYU folks for Pico CTF. I highly recommend Pico CTF. The reason I highly recommend Pico CTF and why they're a little bit different than some of these other CTF competitions is that they take the educational process in mind when they're developing their competitions. So there's a clear progressions of like, slowly some beginner topics and then slowly getting more challenging. And in the in that competition, Pico CTF, they give you a bunch of resources too. So it's like, okay, this is this challenge, but if you get stuck, these are all the resources that are directly related to these challenges, right? So therefore, you have a chance of like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. Then rather than just, it's quitting the CTF, it's like, okay, I'm going to learn some new stuff based on the resources they give you. And this is one thing that I kind of don't like for some of the, so two big problems. The biggest problem I have with CTF competitions is when they have this element where it's just guesswork, where you just had to guess the right thing, and then based on that guess, it will give you the right avenue of solving it. And there's this really good write-up by Jordan Weens, I think. He has his own CTF site, and it gives you instructions on how you actually create a fun to play and a good CTF competition versus a CTF competition that's just frustrating and just a horrible experience. And the ones that are in this horrible category is because they're just having a lot of these weird assumptions or just random guesswork, and it's not related to real tech skills that you would have to use in a red teaming pen testing environment, right? And that's sort of this other thing in terms of how directly connected it is to real pen testing and red teaming. What I would have to say is the two aspects of it, even though there's not a direct connection, one is the problem solving. So one is you have to self-learn in CTF competition, and you have to be self-motivated, and you have to come up with your own methodology of like, you run into this problem, create a methodology. How do you about learning yourself? So that aspect of it is really good. And also that tenacity of when you come into problems to keep having at it, right? But the second part of tenacity, I would caution in terms of there should be a limit. So limit yourself to like 30 minutes to an hour, and like maybe 2 hours is maybe the maximum. If you're stuck for that, if you're not making no forward progress, like if you're making progress, that's okay. Then keep at it. It's like, okay, first I didn't know what tools to use. Okay, now I have that first right tool. I'm getting a little bit progress. Then it's like, that's evidence that you keep on going. But if you're getting nowhere at all, you have no idea what to do, then that's for you to like step aside. It's like, this isn't for me. I need to look at some other CTF competition and do a different challenges because I have no idea what I'm doing. So that's a part I would caution in terms of. And then for yourself, one of the things that you should do for these competitions, if you're interested in having the tech skills and applying it in real world work, is what skills am I developing here? So one skill is like, okay, I need to learn how to do SQL injection with Burp Suite. Then it's like, oh, is that challenge related to that? If it's not, then you're not working on the right challenges. This is a crypto challenge. And if your goal isn't to get better at this particular crypto field, then you need to find the right challenges for you so you can actually learn the right skills and use the right tools that you're interested in learning, right? So that's another part of it too. So the advice I would give is you're going to have more of the responsibility on you as a learner to find the right resources in the competition for you to use to get the skills and get what you need to see if it's directly applicable. But overall, in general, I would say it's good. But right now what I'm seeing is I see a lot of folks with the resume like, oh, they played on CTFs. And if they say that, that could be a good thing, but that might not necessarily be the case. So if I see that on a resume, then I'm going to bug them. It's like, okay, what did you do? Then they're like, well, I look at the robots.txt file, I ran nmap on it, blah, blah, blah. And then if it gives you the flag, great. Then like, if it doesn't give you the flag, what do you do? And then crickets. It's like, wow, you didn't really get the most from that CTF competitions. Or you were just doing the easy stuff that everyone knows. I ran strings on a binary and it gave me the flag. Those are good basics. You need to know that as basics, right? But if that's all you got from CTF competitions, then I'm like, yeah, that's not a very strong candidate for me in my views, right? So, but then that's why like I really recommend the live overflow video and some of the points that John Hammond saying. How do you think about, are you learning? Are you upping your skill level? Because if you're not, you won the CTF competition, but this was a really easy one, or it's like trivial stuff that, you know, a lot of just basic stuff will give you the answers. That's that much. So that's why I sort of caution, you know, that aspect of it. And then this connects back again to, you know, sort of a tangent of your question, Dave, is like, how much time should you spend on CTF? Is that the best? The better one is like, what's the best use of your time to get better at tech skills? So I would say CTF could be a part of that, but you have to use it intelligently. Like for me now, in my case, I see it mostly, I'll play it once in a while just for that aspect of it. Like you're sort of kind of touching on what kind of aspect of it's good for. One is you're doing problem solving in like unknown binaries, unknown challenges. Like you don't know what the challenge is going to be, and you're like, you know, wow, I have no idea what's going on. How do I quickly get some context? Like, how do I go? What do I need to solve this? Yeah. So and then the tenacity, the second part is tenacity, and I learned this both from CTFs, but then also I really highly recommend the offensive security training course, specifically the OSCP, and I also took the OSEP. And the really good thing about those courses, they really get you in this try harder, and that's another video in itself and what it really means. But this idea of like you don't give up, and you sort of have a really smart approach about being very tenacious, and that's sort of this really big divide I see for people who has that tenacity. I see it in you, Dave. I have that tenacity, but a lot of people in our industry, once they run into a hard problem, they're like, they give up. They're like, I didn't want to do it anyways. This is stupid. What does that have to do with the real world? This is stupid. I don't like it. And because they couldn't solve it right away, right? And they because they didn't have that tenacity aspect. But I think that's a different video that, you know, we should do just based on that very superpower aspect of having the tenacity. And that was how I was able, that recent CTF competition that I was just showing off here, right? I was able to solve all the problems because I developed that special ability of tenacity from going through the OSCP and going through some of these other CTF type things that gave me that ability. And I think that is a huge game changer, besides the ability of having critical thinking and being a very good self-learning and figuring out how do you go best about processing your time learning. And that does tell right back into what I was talking about in terms of now how I use my time with CTF, in terms of, you know, I go to blog posts, I watch different videos, I get things I do. This is why I do these weekly things with you, Dave, and my other friends, right? This is one of the best ways of learning, is actually to get these different tools, such as Hashcat, such as the Z3 libraries. That is the best way of learning versus, oh, this is another Nmap challenge. Okay, I'm going to Nmap. Oh, look, there's a flag for the report. Oh, no, I did Nmap for the 1,000th time. Ooh, like, no, I have to do new things to even get better. And to do that, if CTF isn't the right avenues, then you're going to have to do what we're doing here with these learning videos that we're sharing on the internet, right? And so that's why, like, for me now, CTFs, I play it once or twice a day. I use it more for after a competition is over, either if it's online or I could download the binaries, or just reading through the write-ups and the walkthrough videos to learn new techniques, and then to figure out, and if you want to really power up your ability, you would create your own challenges. That's what I've done in the past in certain instances where it's like, that's an interesting challenge. Let's see if I can do it in my own VM environment. Let me put up some Docker file, my own Docker container or my own VM, and see if I can create the challenge itself. So not even solving it, but creating the challenge itself. And that opens a whole new door of learning when you're actually like, because that's going to get you in terms of, okay, what makes this challenge work? What makes it not work, right? And you kind of saw that behind the scenes within the Cyberforce competition when we created the challenge VMs, right? In terms of, now this attack doesn't work. It's like, wow, to get this vulnerability working, there's a lot that just to get the service with the right configuration so a certain exploit can work, right? Whole different world. And that's way more valuable than just, okay, I'm going to play this this same level of competition. So in a nutshell, that those are some aspects of the answer to your question.
Right. Well, I really like that response, because I think for me, it kind of is almost like, okay, so you see CTFs as a mindset development environment.
Ideally, I think ideally, yes. Ideally, and then also exposure to a lot of different technical areas. But again, you would have to invest a lot of time in each of those areas to get the most out of it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so in the time that we have left on this topic of CTFs, for me, I just put something in chat about a website, and I kind of wanted to get your opinion.
I love it.
So, you know, there are a lot of, you don't necessarily, I think, have to play in CTFs to get those skills, but in order to get the skills to play in a CTF, I think there are some training grounds that at least I have tried to spend time in. So one of them is Over the Wire, which is fantastic. I think it's called overthewire.net, overthewire.org. And it's a place that you can SSH to. You'll go to the website, you have to SSH to it. And in order to get to the next level, you have to get the password. And that initially, when I started learning to really get Linux skills, Over the Wire was what was the fountain that I drank from. And so it progresses from like Over the Wire, you know, just some Linux to Narsti. I can't even pronounce all the names, but like teaching you like web server security and some of those things. And in order to get to those places, you know, you can start out with just having, you know, PuTTY if you have a Windows computer, or if you have a Mac, just open the command line and go SSH to it. But this will kind of get you through those. And I've also found that Try and Hack Me is a great site that'll walk you through some of those things. And then there's also like Hack the Box that people have talked about. So Candy, do you think that sites like this, like Over the Wire, are a good place for someone to go to if they're new, or to like refresh skills?
Yes. So this is, I find this hilarious because this was the first wargaming. This was the first pseudo CTF thing that I went to. So when I first started this over 10 years ago, right, Vortex was the only one, and I don't recommend Vortex as a first war game to play. It's extremely challenging, but the other ones, right, Bandit, Not Us, really good beginner ones. I loved it. And funny enough, right, I went through it even though I had a lot of experience, but I still had a lot of fun playing it. And when I told you about references, right, this was the first site I saw it, right, where it gives you a challenge and then gives you the reference on like what you need to do to actually solve the challenges. I saw this first from Vortex, and eventually I saw that from Pico CTF as well. So yeah, I totally I highly recommend this site as well. And this was one of the sites where I developed a lot of my CTF skills. Right, that was for me personally. But the thing I caution about Over the Wire is, again, do your research, find the right one to start with. Like Bandit, Not Us, and I think there's a beginner's web one too. Pick the appropriate one and then eventually progress. And yeah, I highly recommend this. So awesome. Okay.
Yeah, no, and I think these are some great points, Candy, to you know, because I know that I have failed a number of CTFs.
Oh, depressing.
Yeah, but yeah, one of the things that I will mention is that because I failed the CTFs, and then when asked about them, because I too put them on my resume, I was like, oh no, I failed.
Sure,
I
thank
never
you.
won.
Yeah.
And they were like, okay, why? And I was like, well, because I learned how to do this.
Yeah.
So I think that's, for me, I don't know, just being honest, you know, like, yeah, I didn't win.
We're the same way.
Do well.
Yeah, we're the same way. Yeah, and that's why. And that's the kind of candidate that I would prefer if I was sort of doing a hiring interview, right? And this is why I really love the live overflow video on CTF and how you approach it. He took the same approach where. And he is an amazing, right now, he is one of the top CTF players, Live Overflow is. But he showed his process. And still to this day, he's so humble in terms of, I don't know what's going on here. And then this is how I slowly learned and got better. And basically, for him, it's this long process of failure. I imagine you saw that video too. And I was like, that's exactly. But then in contrast, check out this other story that I have from some of these friends that I do know, where they don't want to admit that they fail at CTF because they think it's a bad thing to admit to that. unfortunately, yeah, but that's just sort of their, unfortunately, that was their mindset, right? And then they quit CTF because of that too. So before they, they might say, oh yeah, I did the CTF, I rocked it, I won. And then I asked them like, oh, have you played this one? It's like, no, I don't do CTF anymore. And then, when I get them like to speak honestly about it, they told me honestly where they didn't know how to solve this. They felt like they were no good. They had all these imposter syndromes, if you have it, and they just wanted to pretend and just kind of avoid. So I see that a lot in the industry too. So that's why I want to bring this up, where it's like, if you sort of take an approach that Dave and I and Live Overflow had, the world would be so much nicer and you could have so much more fun and approach it better, versus a lot of these people who only put, yeah, I want these CTFs. And then you ask them like, oh, what did you do? It's like, oh, my buddy solved all the challenge. I just worked on these problems and I didn't solve anything. That could be the reality, unfortunately, right? So I've seen that as well. So, and yeah, I really want to share that with the broader audience, because I see that as a huge problem with a lot of these people who are not having success, and then they feel bad about themselves. And it's like, dude, it's not necessarily your fault. You're just taking the wrong approach. And if you change your mindset, you can get so much more out of it by picking the right one and approaching it in the right manner.
And I think you're really driving home a great point there, Candy, about how, these are games.
Yes.
This is not a job interview. This is not a production task that you have to do. This is something fun.
Yeah.
And I think for me, when I started playing them, and I too don't play them very much anymore with all the responsibilities I have.
Yeah.
But I definitely felt that, like, if I don't get good at this, I will never make it.
Yep.
And it's like, you know what? I ended up making it in a sense.
Totally.
I have a job in cybersecurity. Yeah. I help out, in some cyber games. I've gotten to red team. And the sheer fact is, most of the time, the stuff I try does not work. Period. I do not get into the system. I sit there for 8 hours and I am Googling or I am giving advice.
Yes.
And you know what? That's fine. You know why? Because, well, it's a game.
Yeah.
In the end, I'm going to walk away from the game. I'm going to go to McDonald's. I'm going to get a Big Mac. I'm going to go home. And then I can either read or research, or I can be upset. And, I choose the latter. Like, let's not be upset. It's just a game. And I really like how you're really driving that point home, Candy, where it's like, this is a place for you to learn. And you shared, honestly, your frustration that you had with that CTF challenge, and that was so impactful, because I was like, I'm sitting here watching you and Chris and all the others like do all this stuff, and I'm like, whoa, these guys are top level, man, wow. And then like you're like, oh, I wasn't able to get at it, and I saw your email and I was like, like a reminder of the whole like, we're all just learning and trying, and
exactly.
No one's going to be 100% perfect. So
totally.
Really appreciate it.
No, yeah, definitely. And this is a message I want to get across out there, because fortunately for me, I've heard the things that I'm saying right now from people I really respect too, that I thought are like amazing, but then they'll have some gaps in there because no one knows everything, and they'll freely admit to it, and that for me was just like a total game changer, because I thought, wow, these guys are just like amazing ninjas. They know everything about everything. It's like, wow, they didn't know this really obvious thing, which is okay, because no one can know everything, right? And that's why they shared that aspect with me, and I want to share it with a much broader audience, because I see it as such this bad crippling bad mindset that I see it across our industry, unfortunately. And yeah, that's why I really like doing these videos to sort of get that across. So awesome. Okay.